Michael O Doherty is a pioneer in the field of healthcare, best-selling author who has 28 years' experience in guiding many, many people indeed back to health. He's also a very popular guest on the programme, and I'm delighted to say that Michael is in studio with me now. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning again, Fran. Thank you.
Fresh and well you're looking as well.
Thank you.
Did you have a foggy trip?
Foggy trip, yeah. It was foggy enough now on the way down this morning, but look, once you take your time on the roads, when you're leaving, when you come from Limerick outwards anyway, you have no choice but to go slow,
Indeed, so. Yeah. And many people, of course, sitting in cars for hours, sedentary lifestyle, people like me sitting here at computers all day. Indeed, the impact on general health, Michael, of that lifestyle.
I think we haven't really addressed the real problems associated with the sedentary lifestyle. We hear people talking about it a lot. Sometimes people don't understand the implications of that, apart from how one's behaviour changes. We'll chat about that, but I think a lot of people don't seem to understand that we have a second heart, and our second heart really are our calf muscles. And the reason that it's called our second heart is because the calf muscles pump the venous blood up to the heart and also pumps the lymph system up as well. So when you're sitting for prolonged periods of time, and that can be just maybe an hour, 2 hours, at any one given time, what's happening is the blood and lymph is pooling in the lower part of the body, and that means then the heart has to work harder to pump blood, oxygen and nutrients throughout the body and to the brain in particular, and particularly in the afternoon. This is why we see people who sit a long time really suffer a lot with fatigue in the afternoon, and of course then this leads to behaviour. So it's really about people beginning to appreciate and understand that every hour at the very least you have to be up and walking around and moving your body, or at least getting those calf muscles to squeeze properly so that they can pump those that blood, that venous blood.
Well, Michael, I never heard about this. I never knew about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about it. We kind of take it for granted that, well, our heart is a muscle as well, of course, like our calf muscles. Our heart does all the work. Well, it actually doesn't. It has to work harder if you don't help it. So this is something that people need to begin to realise, that if we don't learn how our body functions, then we're never going to be able to appreciate why it is we have symptoms. We have swelling and all of that in our legs. And think of elderly people at home, for example, people maybe with diabetes, people with underlying health issues, and they're sitting for prolonged periods of time. Lorry drivers, as you say, people sitting on cars. I mean, if you're on a flight for anything more than 4 hours, you run the risk of throwing off a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, for example. So the whole idea is that you have to wear socks. Now, the thing is, and this is important, and actually standing can be equally as bad if it's for prolonged periods. So if you're standing a lot, you need to make sure you're standing on the right mats.
So retail workers, nurses,
absolutely,
all of it, yeah.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, everything is pooling down. Now, if you're walking and moving, then that's a help, obviously. But the problem is that if you are standing a lot, then the calf muscles. This is why women and indeed men get problems with varicose veins. Because they come under pressure. And of course it causes lots of issues. So yeah, the real key is, if you're standing a lot, to try maybe wear those socks. As I said, if you're sitting on a plane for 4 hours, it's not because you're on a plane, it's the fact that you're sitting for that long period of time. And the thing is this is the surprising thing on the research around this, is that you could then be going to the gym 2-3 times a week. It has no influence on this. No influence whatsoever. So this is the research, that unless you're getting up for probably 10 minutes at least every hour to get up and walk around. And this is why everybody who comes to my clinic, I advise them, get an extendable desk. So for me in my own clinic, I never sit in my own clinic bar I'm doing my work.
Yeah.
If I'm on the computer, if I'm showing people stuff on my interactive screen, I'm always standing, and I have a rubber mat that's specifically for the standing to help with pressure on the legs. So people often say I have restless legs. Restless leg syndrome.
Especially at night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
People often have restless legs because they're sitting down for long periods throughout the day. And you think about it, you're travelling to work in your car, you're going from your car into your job, you're sitting in your job in front of of a desk all day. If you're not getting up, after a couple of hours, or at least after an hour, you're running into problems. Then you're driving home. Then you're sitting in the couch in the evening. Then you're going from there to possibly bed. So when you look at the amount of time that you're active in the modern day, then you can see how many problems this can cause. So people with this restless leg syndrome, aches and pains in their legs, you can take magnesium, and all of that helps. Magnesium is really, really helpful. But again, I would advise anybody before they take anything to certainly seek their medical advice.
Something you said there, though, that is a very big statement, because a lot of us who might go to the gym think that sort of immediately then alleviates all of our issues, that we can sit and we can do whatever we want. Yeah. We go to the gym to fix things, but that's not the case.
No, the evidence doesn't suggest that at all. While exercise is absolutely brilliant, and when it comes to, because it's not just about the heart and that, but also over prolonged periods, if you're not getting proper blood, oxygen, nutrients to the brain, is this leading to further cognitive decline? So when we look now at the research around cognitive decline in younger people, we look at Alzheimer's, dementia, these types of conditions. We have to appreciate this is something also people don't understand. Your brain is your biggest vascular organ. It's the most vascular activity is going on in your brain. So when you think about that, like, there are processes in the brain that we don't seem to understand. We think, well, it's a ball of fat or jelly, and we can drop it on the floor and it looks like jelly. It's not at all. It's nothing like that. So when we think that, because when you start to understand your own body and you understand blood flow, because energy carries blood, blood carries oxygen and nutrients around the body. So if the blood isn't flowing to the brain, so how are you getting your energy? Now, the thing you have to think about here, if the blood isn't flowing to the brain, you're not getting the benefits of the food. So even if you eat good food, if the blood isn't getting to the brain, then you're not getting the oxygen and nutrients. So your brain requires 25% of the energy from your food on a daily basis. Now, that energy has to be the right type of energy, of course. It can't be, because the brain requires a drip feed of glucose, not a sudden boost of sugar and energy, like, from chocolate, sweets, biscuits, cakes, coffee. That's a sudden boost. The brain doesn't like that, because then the pancreas secretes high levels of insulin to break that down. Then ultimately, then your brain gets tired again. So it needs a continuous drip of glucose, and that has to come from the right sources, some fruit, and using the right types of food and all of that kind of thing. And what happens is, you see that when what happens really then is that when you're starting to feel tired in the afternoon, and the blood isn't getting to the brain, you're not getting the oxygen and nutrients, well, you're getting that dip, that 3-4 o'clock dip. And the automatic thing then is, well, the brain learns how you deal with this is you take your sweets, your coffee, your sugar, and so on, and suddenly then you're into a behavior. And that behavior then is a dangerous behavior, because we now know that sedentary lifestyle absolutely causes health conditions. Apart from what we just talked about, it causes diabetes. We know it can lead to heart disease. So there's so many different problems. Then, of course, we have a lot of women and people looking to with weight gain, because the organs inside, they're being fed, you're sitting on them all the time. There's nothing moving, and if you have nothing moving, you have stagnation. If you have stagnation, then you cannot be healthy. So it's a very unhealthy way of living.
It's certainly the kind of education that needs to get out there, isn't it? I mean, there's so much I've learned from the last 10 minutes here, even.
Yeah, and that's it. You see, for me, I'm continuously learning. I really want to figure out more and more about why it is, and I would do a lot of online courses and programs with neuroscientists and neurologists, and talk with various vascular professors, and get into the real nuts and bolts and try to bring it into the public domain in a language that's easy to understand. And as I said to you, we're the architects of our own problems, but we don't realize it, because, like you say, we're not educated to understand the nature of our behavior on a day-to-day basis. So we absolutely can prevent a lot of modern day illnesses. Like, we know that exercise now has been shown to actually prevent certain types of cancers, for example. We know that exercise is so important, and for the brain, it is the one fundamental thing that has really been shown to be very, very effective. But like we see a lot of people going away and are going on diets. We know realistically the science and the statistics tell us that, the people who go on a diet, just on the diet alone to lose weight or whatever the case may be, we know that only 10% of them only eventually, benefit from that and maintain the weight loss, because we're not really looking at the underlying cause of the problem and the neural programming and the way the brain developed and all of that kind of stuff from when we were children. So there's a huge sort of array of issues that one has to look at, and we look at this in our clinics. We look at food as a behaviour, and if we don't address our behaviour, so people talk about positive thinking and negative thinking. I often say to people, forget about thinking, just look at positive behaviour and negative behaviour. So if people were to get a blank sheet right now, and if they were to put 3 headings on the top of that sheet: my good behaviour, or my positive behaviour, my negative behaviour, and my aspired behaviour. So your negative behaviour, you put down all the things you're doing on a daily basis. We have this urgency lifestyle at the moment. We feel we need to be doing more and more and more and more, and doing all these things. Look at all the negative behavioural patterns that you have developed. Look at the positive ones. Then look at your aspired behaviours. What would you aspire to be? Anybody out there listening to this say, what type of person, what would you aspire to be? What would your ideal pattern of behaviour be on a day-to-day basis? And then what you do is you look at the obstacles to that. And suddenly, if you start to change some of the negative behaviours, look at those and say, well, I could change that. I could reduce this. I could stop that. Start listening to the subconscious mind.
And Michael,
program.
have you thought about, if you take aspiration, for example, we'd all aspire to have a healthy body and a healthy mind and all of that. Why do we destroy ourselves? Why are we doing things that we know are bad for us?
It's a very powerful question, and this is the real question we've got to get into. It's the neural programming. Because from the moment we're conceived, the brain is developing. By the first trimester our brain has fully developed. But our brain is fully developing from the age, from that moment onwards, right up until the age of 25. But the brain is always changing and growing. Now, we don't seem to understand this. And we have a process in the brain, glia cells and astrocyte cells. These are continuously cleaning the brain. Just to go back briefly, when you have poor behaviour or negative behaviour, what happens is we program the brain in that way. Now, this often affects our sleep. While we're sleeping, if we're not getting into the proper deep sleep restorative state, what's happening is that the brain is not able to clean itself. So the brain goes through a cleaning process, glia cells, and particularly, and earlier development is pruning. Any stress or any trauma in our lives can lead to this disruption in the functioning of our brain's processing. And what happens is when our brain processing becomes disrupted, then what happens, we adapt behaviours from a very early childhood. So we program our brain. So our default program is that we might say, well, we're on a diet or whatever the case may be, but yet we pull up at a garage and we walk in and we say, I'll have that bar of chocolate. Yeah. It's, I'm entitled to this, I deserve my treat. This is all a program. This is all a learnt behaviour. And the real key is to understand that. And once you start to understand that and get into that understanding of how our brain, neurally wires, that our brain wires and fires, when we understand that we're wired to fail nearly because of the way we're conditioned as children. We're programmed nearly to fail because we're programmed not by something that we've decided ourselves, but indeed by what others have decided for us and the environment we've grown up in. So this is really what happens then. And we think then that we can't solve our own problems. We think then that we've got to take this pill, that pill, go on this diet, that diet or the other diet. No. What happens is, unless you get into understanding the ultimate cause of your behaviour, you never really are addressing the problem. And often food is an addiction, and I heard you talking about it earlier on with a gentleman, but often food is an addiction. Like any addiction is an escape from pain. And often when we get into understanding why people have a certain type of behaviour with food, we can really get back into some childhood issues and lots of that kind of stuff that we often see in our clinic. So it can be hugely complex, but this is the real cure for the problem.
The big fear for many people, certainly fear for me, because my dad had a form of dementia. That is the big thing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you put the sedentary lifestyle down as a cause?
A contributing factor.
A contributing
factor. Look at
but there's so many more people suffering now, it appears to me anyway.
They are, and they're really suffering from that because we need to understand how stress affects the brain. We have failed to, we have breast check. Fantastic. Bowel check. People go and have scopes, scans. We have heart check. But nobody checks the brain. And yet the brain is the organ we're using every day, and we think, well, it just sits inside our skull and it's fine. But yet, if you're suffering from tension and stress all the time, then what's happening is that is going to affect the functioning of the brain. It's going to restrict blood flow. If you're not getting blood flow, oxygen, nutrients to that brain is going to atrophy. It's going to shrink. Then certain processes in that brain are going to become affected. Okay, and then what happens is memory, and particularly the memory area, becomes affected. And this is then why we're having so many problems now. Lack of exercise, lack of mobility. We're seeing the research that even though you may be genetic predisposed, okay, the research is clearly saying we can prevent that. We can prevent it through proper lifestyle. Now, a lot of people talk about stress management. No, it's the wrong word to use. Life management, I like to use. Let's look at your life. How do you manage your life? How are you managing your health? How are you managing your day-to-day living? If you're managing your life, managing your day-to-day living, managing your time, managing your energy, it's about a life management strategy and program. There is no quick fix, no magic wand, no magic pill. There is no cure for these types of diseases. The key here is to prevent these problems. You prevent them through lifestyle. All of the evidence is emerging. I see a lot more medical practitioners, and various fields going into this area now because they see the real area. And we see so much money being invested in this country in the health service. But there's nothing going into educating people about what you and I just talked about, where we need to get into the home and educate people about this.
And this would keep us out of the A&Es, and it would keep us out of the hospitals. And
absolutely. We have this idea that suddenly dementia or cancer or heart disease or diabetes just drops off the sky, that we wake up one morning and it appears. No, these problems, in our early childhood, these problems can begin. From the moment of conception, from womb life, from early childhood living. So we need to begin to understand this early childhood process.
I was talking to a professor earlier on about disinformation and misinformation and all of that.
Yes.
You see, you talk about lifestyle. If you Google about this, you are just inundated with all sorts of opinions and all sorts of lifestyle choices and plans and all of that. How do you sort out what is proper?
It is a challenge to people, and I'm doing this work over 30 years now, and for me it has been trial and error. And I think you keep it very simple. There is no one diet. You can go into keto, the paleo, you can go all on the different diets. It's not going to make any difference. You can use the mindfulness, you can use all of these programs. People say, okay, mindfulness is equal to antidepressants in the treatment of depression. It might be equal to it in how it influences it, but it doesn't still deal with what causes the problem. Yes. So we still have to go back and deal with what causes the problem. What I have found in my clinic to be most effective, simplicity. Keep it simple. Okay, learn to eat properly. Learn to breathe properly. Learn to be responsible for your health. Be mindful of your behaviours. A little bit of exercise. And sleep. If you can eat properly, get proper sleep, and do a regular exercise, okay, your life will be changed forever. It ain't, and it doesn't mean you don't enjoy the niceties of life. You can enjoy the niceties of life. But if you're sitting down every day, like we've begun this conversation with, if you're sitting down and have a sedentary lifestyle and there is no blood and oxygen nutrients getting around your body, and you start substituting that energy then with all of the wrong types of fats and energies and all that, then suddenly you're going to create the environment for illness. And that's the reality.
And talk to me a little bit about food. I mean, you speak about diet and how important that is. I mean, what are the no-nos? I mean, is it sweet stuff?
Look at excess. All the research is there. The type of food that we're living in today, because of the convenient living, everything is packaged and processed. And that's the problem. It's the packaged and processed foods. Now, you go into any supermarket and you walk down the aisles and you got all of the packets and the bottles and the tins and the cans, and parents are investing money in this and their children. This doesn't feed your brain. This doesn't feed your body. So we're either investing money in our illness or we're investing money in our health. So the key is we need to eat fresh food. Cook it and eat it. This is what we have to do. People will say, oh, I don't have time. You better make time. Because if you don't make time to eat fresh food, go in, have your fruits, your vegetables, go to your butcher, buy your fresh meat, cook it, sit down as a family, communicate. One of the biggest things that has happened, I know you alluded to it earlier in a previous conversation, you were talking about COVID, and we taught X, Y about COVID, and COVID gave people a little hint of this. But the biggest breakdown in our society has been community. That's been the biggest breakdown. Because when I grew up and you grew up, Fran, we grew up in a community, we played GA, food was fresh, there wasn't mobile phones, we went to the garden, we cooked fresh food, there were a lot of expectations, all of this our model of living was totally different. Now we have a model of living that is all about convenient living, convenient eating, convenient living. And if we're going to be pumping sugars and the wrong types of fats into our body, that's the big thing. If you could minimize the sugar, particularly in your diet, if you could eliminate the processed foods, I'm not going to be specific, but if you could eliminate all the processed foods, buy fresh food, cook it and eat it, and no microwave, it'll be a massive difference. Now that takes time and effort. But I do it at home. I have to do it at home. I'm not going to come in here and talk this language unless I do it. So getting up in the morning, have your poached eggs, have your boiled egg, have your oatmeal, put your fruit in. There's nothing wrong with that. Having your soup for dinner, maybe a tuna sandwich or something like that, and maybe spelt bread. In the evening, having your stir fry or all healthy veg and your meat or your stews or something like that. You want to put healthy, wholesome food that gives you energy. But what we're doing is all day long, if you listen to the stories that I listen to in my clinic, and I say to people, do you eat okay? And they say, oh yeah, our food is healthy. And when we sit down with them, they're not eating. And then they wonder why they're tired and sick and they've no energy and they're stressed and they've headaches and they've all these problems.
Ger wants to know what you think about alcohol where healthy living is concerned. I mean,
well, and all in moderation, Ger. Yeah. We do see the link between excessive alcohol and disease. We know the links between that and cancers. We know the links between alcohol and dementia, for example. We know there is a link. However, drinking at home the research shows that drinking at home has a worse effect than drinking in a bar.
Is that because of measures?
Because of the social activity. Whatever way, the research has shown that if people are out having a few drinks in a pub, having a chat and a crack with the lads, the body seems to be able to handle it different. Whereas if you're sitting down at home and you're looking at a screen and you're drinking, it has a much more negative impact on the body. This is recent research.
Am I looking very guilty here, I wonder? So, somebody making a very good point as well in terms of natural food, and you speak about natural, fresh food and all, but how natural and fresh can the food be when the soil is often poisoned and, look at air pollution and all? It's a good point, isn't it?
It is a very good point. Yeah. I mean, look at when we look at the fruit we're buying in our health shops, or in our veg shops, we're clearly seeing that this stuff has left some other country maybe 3 months ago. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, this is where we are. We are at that point because of population, because people are forced out to work, people don't grow their food anymore. Look at, we could spend a lot more time at having our own little greenhouse if we had that possibility out the back. But the reality is, in a lot of supermarkets now, in fairness to the likes of Tesco's and SuperValu and Dunnes and all those and Centras and all that, we do see they are making more effort in getting as much organic food as we can. And people would say, oh God, Michael, organic food is expensive. Listen, guys, if you think health is expensive, try illness. The cost, if you get ill, to yourself, to your health, to your family, is huge. So don't value yourself on the basis that, it's too dear to buy it, because the implications are huge. I don't know if anybody has watched the program on Netflix called Living to 100 or Live to 100. It clearly demonstrates that, it's all about our model of living. And if we have a proper life management program and we learn to manage our lives strategically and smartly, we can prevent a lot of illnesses.
Somebody trying to drag you into controversy here. What does Michael think about red meat?
Now and again, absolutely excessive red meat. There are problems associated with red meat again. But again, to go back to this question, there are people who smoke a lot and who don't get lung disease.
All right.
There are people who eat a lot of red meat who it'll have no impact on them. Everything in moderation. The bigger problem here when it comes to food is about metabolism. If you're stressed and anxious, what happens is it disrupts the digestive function, which means you cannot process the food properly, and then it becomes a toxin. So then we associate the food with the disease. Do you get what I'm saying to you?
Very interesting, yeah.
So, no, the food is not about what you eat. It's about what you don't excrete, or it's about what's eating you. So, the research tells us that our body has the ability to metabolize that food if it's all in moderation. So mix it up. You can have your vegetarian stuff. You can have your meat, but everything in balance. Have your chicken and whatever. Have it in balance. People get into this extremist. If people spent more time concerning themselves with their emotional stress and finding time to unwind, because that's the biggest thing. Society is wound up. If we could get people to spend more time unwinding, and this is what we find working with the energy system in the clinic, that it has the ability to unwind the patient, to reset the patient's all the different systems, and then the body from there can begin to handle a lot of things.
Very good. And with huge interest in our conversation today. If people want to talk to you, meet you, Michael, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, michaelodoherty.com is our website. Or Francis, you can give her a call on 087 67 21888, and we'd only be too delighted to help. And I just want to thank the people from Tipperary who've come to the clinic, and I'm hoping that it's benefiting them. So I really, really appreciate it. We do our best for them.
Always great to see you. Always great to have you on the show. Thanks very much indeed,
Thank you,
Michael.
indeed.
We'll take a break. We're back with more in just a moment.